quick one before we get going. So, as you know, the Blocmates podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Certainly shouldn't be considered as financial advice. We have absolutely no idea what we're talking about half the time. So, any investment decision you do make should be based on your own research and your own understanding of the risks involved. One more thing as well, there's around 50% of people who listen regularly who aren't subscribed yet. So if you please could just do us a favor and hit the subscribe or the follow button or the like button. Helps content grow, helps us grow, helps it reach more people like yourselves, and it means the world to us as well. So that's the last I'll ask of you. So yeah, let's get to the episode. All right, welcome back. So we've got 563, who we all know, and now we've got Henri from Privy. And I first initially found Privy, which I'm pretty sure a lot of more retail focused and degenerates would have, by some of the posts around friend.tech. And then I reached out and thought this will be a really interesting podcast to get you on because of the explosion that we're seeing in consumer facing apps. And I think it's very, very early days of what's actually possible, but who else better to have that conversation with? So Henri, thanks for jumping on. Apologies it took so long to get nailed down.
Super happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, anytime. So usually just want to take it back a step before we get into it and before I start rambling on, but I'd love to kind of hear how you've got to this point in time with Privy. Like, what was your previous life? Is there any fun Web3 crypto origin stories around? Because usually people have some embarrassing ones and some good ones, but if there's anything like that, you could let us have the inside scoop on that.
For sure. So I got into crypto, I guess, the academic route. If there were multiple routes, mine was academic. I started a company out of college. Went to college here in the United States, and ended up returning to grad school afterwards. And I really liked number theory. I took one class by this professor who I thought was amazing. I was like, all right, well, I'm going to take all of these classes. And I ended up doing basically a lot of distributed systems, cryptography, thinking I was going to get a doctorate in the subject. And around that time, basically, a really good friend of mine told me, listen, instead of spending 5 years writing research papers, why don't you come here and do research and ship product? You can sort of work on cutting edge things, but you can also work on a product that's going to have a major impact. And I thought that was very enticing. And so I ended up joining him at a company called Protocol Labs. And Protocol Labs was building distributed systems. They're the folks who have built IPFS, who have built a library called libp2p that's very good. And I got to working on a layer one blockchain called Filecoin. Filecoin is a blockchain for file storage. You can imagine if you have spare 100 gigs of space on your hard drive that you're not using, you can actually put it up for rent. We use, at the time, I think it was the largest snark circuit in production, but basically ZK proofs to have you prove that you're actually storing the files that you're saying you're storing through this thing called proof of space-time. And then, which is a funky name, by the way. And then we basically have this sort of on-chain market through which people can basically rent and supply storage. And I think the idea is to basically provide a decentralized alternative to something like AWS, using the very long tail of available storage in the world. So I spent about 3 years working on this, and left the company around the time we launched Filecoin. And at the time, I think I was really excited about a lot of what I was seeing in crypto. I was having a lot of fun, frankly, collecting NFTs, doing some fun things in DeFi, and sort of playing around in the space generally. But I was also pretty frustrated with just how foreign the work I was doing seemed to be to the people around me, to my family or to friends. And I was like, man, I wish Web3 cared more about UX and about the end user experience for more traditional users. And I was frustrated with just how technical the space is and how much of a sort of prosumer bend it has, how expert users need to end up being in order to interact with products. And the other thing that was a little bit, on my mind was the privacy implications of having on-chain data. Specifically, I think my take was it's inevitable that we're going to start putting more real-world user data on chain. And as we do, chains are by their very nature transparent and auditable. That's what makes them really interesting as a new tool. and it seems like a really bad place to put personal information for people, to put people's home addresses, to put people's social security numbers, and so on. And so I wanted to work on privacy tooling. I left Web3 really for about a year to kind of dig into what that meant, and immediately sort of found my way back down the rabbit hole, thinking actually Web3 is the perfect place to build this stuff, because we have this nascent stack that has this superpower, which is this sort of trustless state that can be used by any application in order to build these more coordinated, more incentivized systems using, again, a shared state that every application, every builder out there has. And we're kind of missing this one piece, which is the ability to interact with real world users. And I guess my thought was, what if I could talk to a real person as opposed to talking to a wallet address? Couldn't we, in that way, enrich what can be built in Web3 and ultimately yield better UX and maybe more mainstream experiences in the space? And so that sort of thinking, how do we connect sort of on-chain and off-chain data together safely, is kind of what got me back into the space and working on Privy.
Awesome. That's quite a story, and quite topical, Filecoin, because we were having a laugh the other day that Arthur Hayes had a 20-minute speech at Token 2049 where he proceeded to just pump his Filecoin bags that he's obviously bought quite
as a fellow bag holder, I am all for it.
But the kind of thesis was sound, to be fair. I haven't really thought too much into this, so I might sound like a complete idiot to the uninitiated here, but the whole, if AI ever overlaps with crypto, as opposed to having centralized servers storing such valuable and potentially censored information, why wouldn't a decentralized option be viable? And that was his whole thesis, and then proceeded to deliver this great pitch, which everyone was laughing at, but
but this is, for what it's worth, I think this gets to part of what I think is so interesting, which is how do we convey value of these systems in ways that anyone can understand? And, my honest answer might be very boring, but it is, I see the long-term value in Filecoin does come from trustlessness, from censorship resistance, from, the maybe FVM, which is the virtual machine. That means you can build sort of complex interactive contracts on top of a storage system, and that'll yield applications I think we can't even think of. Deadman switches for assets and digital goods, et cetera, et cetera. And all of this is, I think, really exciting. But in the short term, the things that I think Filecoin competes on is price. You've got an open network where anybody can contribute storage. That means it can be cheaper than centralized alternatives. And I think that's a lot of when I see a crypto product, I start to think, well, there's sort of the crypto pitch to the initiated, which is like, why is it sort of working within the realm of the concerns that generally Web3 or crypto people have? And so this is usually decentralization, trustlessness, and so on. But then I'm wondering, what's the pitch to my mother? And I think, cheaper, faster, better are the sort of three that kind of always work. And so I usually try to find, which one is it? And certainly for us, I think what we're trying to pitch companies is better. You can build sort of better applications, ones that are more fun, that are more intuitive, that are faster, but ones that do so without sacrificing self-custody and without sacrificing interoperability. And there's certainly trade-offs, but we try to minimize these.
So why'd you go down the tooling route as opposed to building your own app? Is it just easier to get a bigger reach?
My favorite tweet, I think, in the Web3 space is from this this fella called Ben Beish, and he has a tweet. It's from I don't actually know the manga that it's from, but it's like a guy like digging through hay and then finding someone else's face, and the caption is Web3 infra builders looking for for apps out there, and the only thing they find is other Web3 infra builders. So I wish I had a really great answer for you. I think I have part of a good answer and part of a bad answer. The bad answer is, I'm a developer, and so I think in terms of tooling, and building tooling felt supernatural to me. And maybe also my first company that I built out of college was a consumer app, and I arguably would have a lot of scar tissue from that. Although I probably would have a lot of scar tissue from working in crypto, and here I am. The better answer is the one that really drove the shape of the product, and I think us building developer tooling was really never in question, because me and my co-founder talked a lot about data privacy, and I think our take was, this is why this company was born, and I think our take early on was privacy is kind of like global warming. It's this thing that people will say they really care about, but when it comes to sort of revealed preference, it ends up being really hard to do anything about. So, I will rank global warming consistently at the top of my list of things that, worry me and I care about. And at the same time, I'm French. I go back to France a few times a year from the US. And in doing so, I blow through my yearly carbon credit as a human being, instantly. And so the way I act is completely inconsistent with my views or how much I care about this. And I think same for digital privacy. It's a thing that a lot of people are concerned with, but we kind of all feel helpless when it comes to how do I do this. I personally run my own email server for a while. It's a fucking nightmare. I don't recommend it. And I just think doing something about data privacy other than get off the internet, which is not a viable solution, feels incredibly difficult. And so I think our stance from the beginning was the solution here is going to have to come through developer tooling. And, thankfully, this is going to be a provocative sentence. There's a lot of regulation coming down the pipe with GDPR, with other things that, frankly, are going to force developers to care about this stuff. So I think our take was developers have to care because they're getting regulated, and they still want to build good products, and users should not have to care, and maybe for the most part don't. And so building developer tooling is the sort of biggest lever that we have for having an impact on this space that we care about.
Yeah, great answer. So because I've been digging deep on what you guys are doing and 563, but there might be some people who you've definitely heard of you guys, but can you give us a kind of a high level of what Privy is, what you're kind of building, and then we'll just kind of double click into some of the immediate features, and then I've got a whole host of questions around all sorts of stuff that you guys have been doing. So yeah, but high level that'd be great for us.
Yeah. So high level, Privy is a single library to onboard all users to Web3. That means one SDK that you can integrate into your app, and that allows you to bring on both, crypto OGs, people who have 15 wallets across multiple providers who use a mix of hardware wallets, cold wallets, hot wallets, every flavor, and want to interact with your app. And so features, for those folks, for example, are being able to have multi-wallet accounts. One of the bigger frustrations in my UX experiences in Web3 over the last few years is having to continually sign out and sign back into OpenSea in order to access various parts of my portfolio. And so we looked at things like, Zapier was doing, and we were like, man, sorry, I did not mean Zapier. I meant Zapper. And we were like, man, multi-account systems and multi-wallet systems are so much more natural. So let's enable basically some user management that caters to folks who have a number of consumer wallets. The second sort of big piece is making it easy for you to onboard people who've never heard about crypto, who don't really care about crypto, but who still want to have self-custodial access to on-chain interactions. And so here we have embedded wallets. And so we use this sort of Shamir secret sharing based system to do key splitting client side and enable users to basically manage their own wallet, but the embedded wallet sits flush with the application. So as a developer, you get a lot more ability to customize the experience for you. And so some of the advantages here, for example, on mobile might be that you don't have to have your user shuttle back and forth between MetaMask and your app. They can stay within the app. They can trigger signatures from inside the app, and the experience is a lot more cohesive. I think, long term, we sort of see ourselves as this user management platform. How do we onboard? How do we activate? And how do we help app developers retain users so they can both have rich interactions with on-chain systems, but ones that feel delightful and that feel easy to use? And I would say one of the core guiding principles of how we've built is a user is a user, meaning regardless of whether your user's coming in with MetaMask, with Ledger, or with an embedded wallet, what you get back is an EIP 1193 provider that you can sort of use in conjunction with any smart contract system. So you don't have to have, if-else statements in your code base saying, oh, well, this person came in this way, so I have to treat them this way, and so on and so forth. No, a user is the same object, and you get to have the same abstraction, but you get to sort of open up the aperture of the audience that you want to be building for. So a lot of our customers and the ones that we are really building for today are really crypto native products, not just, I have this product and I slap the blockchain on top because it sounds cool, but ones that interact with like smart contract systems in interesting ways. But ones that have the ambition of catering to mainstream users and that aren't sort of targeting, you will use my app because it is a crypto app, but that are targeting, you will use my app because it's a cool app. It just happens to use crypto in the background in some very, very interesting ways.
Yeah, that's a great example. So what that point where you just said it's, because I think we have been kind of like technology maxis in a sense at times, and just made it ridiculously impossible for anyone who's not going to be doing it all day every day, or isn't a hobbyist or a tinkerer. It's just kind of, you completely removing those kind of people from out of the equation. And me and 563 did a recent podcast, just sat down and just spoke about it, and we were laughing at the fact that maybe in a couple of years we'll look back on Metabask and just think, how the hell did we even get to the point of where we got to just with the current state of UI and UX? But we just kept coming back to the point of, like, why has it, I wouldn't say been completely neglected, but why has the UI UX onboarding experience been totally kind of, if you look at some of the, we've speed run some of the financial markets and then created some ridiculous onion layers on top of it. But then the most basic necessities of just being completely left to kind of stew and fester in the current state. So have you got any reason or rhyme to why that is?
I mean, I have hypotheses. I think it's a fascinating question, and it's probably one of my favorite questions to think through. And I think the point you made about speed runs really resonates. And, what I might say is, if AI is good at speed running, protein folding and complex system construction, I think crypto is really good at speed running sort of socioeconomic constructs and buildings of governance and coordination systems, which is fascinating in its own right. And where, frankly, you're right, like the space has gotten pulled in this like DAO experimentation, like all of these DeFi, and we've got the emergence of new financial primitives with like flash loans, and it's really fascinating. And so, I think part of it is kind of, emergent behavior. You start sort of digging and you get this really interesting thing, and it like sparks people's imagination. And so they keep on going with this. And so you're seeing sort of 1,000 flowers bloom in one part of the ecosystem and maybe less so elsewhere. And so probably that is part of the neglect, I think, that UX and UI have seen in the space. Frankly, the other part, I think, is really well-intentioned, and is that historically, intermediation on the web has meant giving up control for users. So, Facebook made it super easy for me to connect to friends, and was, an outstanding product in so many ways, and also handled my data in ways that I don't love. And so I think there's a bit of an aversion. If you look at, the crypto roots and putting this back on Bitcoin, maybe some of the libertarian ideals there, I think there's a bit of an aversion to ceding control to third parties. And what is UX if not abstracting away complexity? And so, I think we look and we're like, man, of course a layman user does not care about the gas costs associated to a transaction. They don't understand how the mempool works. They don't understand how gas works. And, it's nice that we have this thing, if you set it here, it'll be faster. If you set it here, it'll be slower. But wouldn't it be nice if you actually set it on the user's behalf? And I think part of that is technical limitation historically. The reality is, like, transactions were super expensive, and that's changing. And part of it, I think, is philosophical. And for what it's worth, I don't mean to dismiss that intuition, because, if there's the alternate bizarro world. We're in one bizarro world right now, which is crypto's hyper complex and hyper technical. The alternate bizarro world is crypto is companies managing private keys on behalf of users and signing stuff for them, in which case it's not really crypto. It's, the traditional internet with like signatures slapped on top of it. And I can easily see that other alternative. And I think this one is much more interesting, because in this one, at least, we've got novel things happening. And so I think it's a healthy tension. And this is part of why we've built both, wallet connectors, a way for you to connect your existing consumer wallet to a product like Rainbow Kit, as well as embedded wallets, is because I think that tension is super, super healthy for the space. If we went through, all of this consumer wallet stuff that we've done in crypto is not interesting. I think we really risk giving away the parts of self-sovereignty and of self-custody that are really, really interesting. And I think building a really good self-custodial experience with embedded wallets kind of means playing with that tension, understanding what are consumer wallets uniquely good at that embedded wallets will never be good at. And conversely, what can embedded wallets do that consumer wallets can't? But I hope we don't move into a world where it's either or, because you'll see this sort of fracturing of the space into basically two schools, which I think would be such a shame. And I think we're working really hard to make it that, this can be a spectrum and a user can sort of evolve through their experience. They can sort of progressively onboard into Web3. And over time, they can find their way to the right model for them in a given app at a given point in time. And this is where, we have this customer friend.tech that's doing really interesting work, but it's really cool to see the sort of range of users that they have, from folks who have never interacted with Web3 and have $0 in their embedded wallets, to folks who are now really deep and have sizable assets in their wallet. And of course, the same wallet doesn't work for both. I think we're utilizing wallets today. Sorry, I clearly found my way to talking about wallets, but we're utilizing wallets today both as like bank vaults and Metro cards. And it stands to reason that like a bank vault and a Metro card should not look the same, probably don't have the same UX, and also don't have the same security properties. And so it's crazy to try and use the same tool for both.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think that the friend.tech examples are a really tangible one for people to kind of explore Privy in more detail. So for me personally, as a like personal kind of anecdote, that downloading, if I even want to call it that, is kind of bypassing the App Store, which I thought was really, really impressive. To actually getting on there and the ease of use, and I kind of felt like I'd missed the step, and then when I realized I hadn't, I was like, shit, this was like a real 0 to kind of 1 moment. There's been a few that I've had. One was kind of Uniswap, and this onboarding experience to friend.tech was something else that made me realize this is something new. There might be a paradigm shift here. So what is friend.tech leveraging from you guys, from Privy, and like what aspects are baked in there that are from the infrastructure that you guys are building that people might be aware of or might not be aware of?
Sorry, can you repeat the question for me? I think I misheard it.
Yeah. So what aspects of friend.tech is integrated with Privy, and what will people might be aware of that they see? Maybe it's the wallet, maybe it's the onboarding, maybe it's the bridge. Like what aspects of Privy are integrated into friend.tech, and kind of how did that whole thing come about? Was the outreach from your behalf? Was the kind of inbound from those guys? Like how did that whole thing play out, and kind of what infrastructure are those guys leveraging from the likes of yourselves?
Yeah. So we were introduced to the folks working on friend.tech. To be honest, I kind of forget how, but when they were working on a prior iteration of a product, and we thought, man, these people really understand sort of consumer app dynamics and consumer social in a way that we don't, certainly, but also that we haven't seen that much of. And so they're going to build some really interesting stuff, and we should really sort of heed their advice as they talk to us. And I think one of the things that we've been very lucky to be able to do is work really closely with developers working on Privy and getting their feedback. And we're, you still have to sort of go through us to get API keys today. And part of the reason is because we want to talk to you. We want to understand what you're building. We want to understand how can we make our product better for you. To answer your question, though, basically they're using Privy in two ways. They're using it for authentication, so logging people in using one of, this time it's Google, Apple, or a phone number. And they're using it for embedded wallet behind the scenes. So what happens is, you have this progressive web app, this PWA, that you're able to install from a website on your phone, as you were saying, sort of side loading it. And from there, you can log in, and this sort of self-custodial embedded wallet is created for you as soon as you do. And then what you have is you're basically interacting and buying sort of keys into people's rooms. So you get to chat with from Twitter that you're able to do. And so the way it works really is upon login, Privy is authenticating you, generating an embedded wallet. You then link your Twitter account to that with friend.tech, and there's some smart contract magic that happens on the friend.tech side of things. And then from there, I'm focusing on our part of the thing, which is frankly the probably less important one, but it's the one I know. From there, you can sort of interact to buy or sell keys. And so every time you click buy or sell within a screen, you've got this little modal that pops up and displays, the from address, the to address, the action type that you're doing, and allows you to sort of purchase from there. All of that are Privy UIs that are built into the app, and that friend.tech's adopted. And yeah, that's really what it is. The other really nifty thing that they did that I think is just a huge feature is they built, I think it's friend.tech/deposit. They basically built a bridging interface so people could bring their own wallets because they saw how much bridging remained a complicated thing to do, and the actual wallet connectors there are ones that we've built out.
Yeah, it was as I say, it was a truly unique experience that I can't wait for the full industry to adopt, if I'm completely honest. And I think a lot of it will be led by consumer apps. And me and 563, before you jumped on, we're just saying we need to get a research report out with regards to kind of consumer apps, because there seems to be something bubbling under the surface. And I think you guys are in very, very good pole position to capitalize on that. But what are you guys seeing on that front? Is my hypothesis true? Is it early? Is it late? Like, what is there anything interesting that you guys are seeing? Because as you say, if you're talking to people when they're requesting APIs and stuff like that, you must be seeing some quite interesting stuff come through.
Yeah, we are. I mean, I would argue it's still early. We are still in the early days of consumer crypto, and I actually think, frankly, there's a lot to be built here. And we've got this entirely new toolkit of on-chain interactions, interoperable smart contracts, the ability to play with tokenomics. There's just this panoply of ways we can build new products, new apps, new sort of gamification engines. And all of these seem really, really exciting to us. We were at the ETH Global Hackathon in New York last weekend, so a few days ago. And that's also, frankly, one of the best places to kind of see where is this space headed, what are people thinking about, what is the zeitgeist right now. So things that I'm particularly excited about that we're seeing, I think we're seeing a lot of really cool stuff in DeFi. And frankly, we work a lot with the team at Molecule. And they're a type of product that I find so interesting because, one, it's unlocking a completely novel sort of funding mechanism for researchers. And obviously, those researchers are not crypto native. They're here because they need to be. I guess of the three value props, faster, cheaper, better. This one is cheaper. They can get funding they couldn't get any other way. And so it yields really interesting ones. But with, on top of that, a lot of interesting parts of coordination and governance sort of layered on top of this. And so actually one of the participants in the hackathon this weekend was this product called Swirl. And Swirl built a 6551, I think I'm getting the number right, abstraction on top of DeFi, where basically you could have an NFT. 6551, again, unless I'm mistaken, is the ability for an NFT to have its own set of wallets or have its own set of assets. And so in this case, they built a system whereby you could basically give grants to a project, but that project was sort of in an NFT container. And then basically you could have a voting and governance mechanism applying to who controls that NFT to sort of understand who controls these assets. And it was really cool to see that sort of abstraction. It was obviously something that you could only ever do in crypto. So DeFi is really interesting. I think we're seeing a lot of stuff in gaming that remains hyper interesting. I'll keep going on the ETH Global tangent since it's very top of mind for me. There's this game called Framed, which was basically a game of werewolf or mafia built on chain using ZK proofs, where people could basically have this interaction. And obviously all of the game state was hidden from the users. But you could imagine these like large global games. And we have a few other folks that we work with who are in gaming and doing really, really cool stuff in that ecosystem. And then obviously social. I think friend.tech's a really great example. I think you have others, but we look at a lot of stuff happening on Farcaster, on Lens, and that all seems to me to be sort of very novel and very interesting. Somebody yesterday I was reading was publishing a Farcaster leaderboard on Dune, saying these are the biggest forecaster accounts. And I remember all the stuff that was happening on Twitter before they shut down their APIs like 10 years ago. And just having that be completely open is, again, really differentiated. You can build ecosystems on top of it. The last one, and I guess I'm kind of going through the best hits that you'll get talking to any crypto VC. So I apologize in advance. But I think maybe the last one is obviously real world assets. I'll name check another customer that we love, a company like Courtyard that is building basically a physical trading card marketplace. So their users are folks who are really excited about Pokemon cards, about baseball cards, about basketball cards. And they meet these folks at card conferences, but then they're basically leveraging, in this case, Reservoir and the smart contract system that they've built to digitize these cards when someone lists them and then have them exist across a range of marketplaces. And so the idea, again, here, maybe in this case, is cheaper, faster. You have a much wider array of people who can potentially buy and sell your cards, and you get to benefit from all of the on-chain dynamics. So I think we're only starting to scratch the surface, but to me, one of the many reasons friend.tech is really exciting is it kind of shows, in this case, using Base and using Privy, what's possible in the next 2 years. And I really think we've come basically a really long way. All of these things could not have been built a year and a half ago.
Yeah, we all, I've apologized to anyone who's heard me say this before, but it felt like definitely towards the end of the last cycle, and we're certainly more focused on kind of DeFi and emerging DeFi like protocols and stuff like that. So it felt like the same. Someone described it as the Taco Bell recipe where there's like 8 ingredients, but they all just get moved around, and it's everything just looked the same, but with a different layer of Ponzonomics or something like that on top. But it feels like really refreshing to see new and novel and completely unrelated products come into the industry, and like for me personally, it's great because we don't have to tell the writers to write about another perp stacks or something like that. Might be something really interesting to write about.
Makes my job easier.
I think that the tension for me, I love the Taco Bell analogy. As for what it's worth, we are entering the era of the quesadilla now. I think for me, the fear, coming into this bear market, and I guess I worked through, 20, I think it was 18 and 19, and was the last one. And I was doing like cryptography research and distributed systems research at the time. So I was way less, market driven. I didn't have Twitter. The echo chamber is very real. But I guess my take is like, my sense coming into this one was, all right, this is the time to like really dig in and focus and try to make things happen that would not otherwise happen. Like, the bull markets are for rapid experimentation and just trying to stay up to speed and sort of help foster and sort of push forward these new use cases that are emerging. The bear market is for building the real stuff that takes some time and that can be built otherwise. And I think my fear was there's sort of this tension. Obviously, if the bear market is too long or too painful and enough developers leave and don't come back, then it just sets back the space for a number of years. And in some cases, potentially forever. I think crypto's out of the bag. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think having digital assets, sovereignty, currency is the future, period. But I think, whether consumer crypto has a 10-year future is a more real question. There are fewer proof points here that have had a sort of mainstream adoption for consumer apps. And so I think my sense was the longer the bear market, the riskier it is in terms of, just overall time cycles for the space. But the shorter it is, the less time we'll have to build the infra that's needed to get real novel use cases out next time around. And so I think this is kind of why I'm excited. And I'm like sort of breathing a sigh of relief is I don't actually know anything about, market dynamics, macro, like I'm as lost as everyone else. But what I do know is that the infra feels ready in a way that it didn't before. And so were we to get a new influx of developers, ready minds, folks who are excited about what's being built, they actually have tooling now that might allow them to build really outstanding mainstream products. And again, I think mainstream is kind of a tired cliche, but it really fucking matters. Or at least it matters to me to build products that anyone can use. So, I'm in it for those reasons.
So have you been encouraged by the amount of developer activity over the bear market, especially in the infra side, and what about the app side too?
I have, and I've been encouraged both by the amount of developer activity and also, frankly, by like the amount of resurgence of old ideas or new ideas that people are contemplating. I like, again, distributed systems as much as the next person. I run my own email server and I mostly function off of a ledger. But I also know that this can't be one size fits all, and this isn't one size fits all. And I think I've seen a lot of builders that, have come into crypto around the same time I did or much before, who are sort of thinking about things in a new way and questioning some of their own assumptions as to what might be the right abstraction for the users that they're trying to serve. And so that's also been really, really encouraging, is I think sort of novel experimentation around accessibility in crypto that I wasn't seeing before.
How important is mobile first for the industry to move forward?
Yeah. I have a very controversial take here, which is very important. I think you can kind of like carbon date when someone got into crypto by their wallet setup, I think. And so like I was shocked when as we were building out the team, kind of looking at how people were setting up their wallets, because so many of my teammates were like setting up mobile wallets, and I've never used a mobile wallet before. Like I came in around like 2016, 2017, and so I've got my like 5 extensions, I've got my power cable and my ledger ready to go. And like every now and then, I started off, I guess it was Mu, it was my Ethereum wallet was the main site that I went to. Now it's safe for the most part, but like you can sort of like date me, I think, based on what happens when you tell me do a transaction. And obviously that is like not the way of the world anymore. And so we had actually, this was like a year ago, but we had a hack day internally at the company where we were like, let's all do the same transaction, mint an NFT, and then send that NFT over to another wallet. But let's all do it using a different suite of wallets. And so, some folks picked Argent. We were really interested in AA at the time, but this was before 4337. Some folks picked, various things. And I was like, man, this space is so much broader than the other ones. And so I think mobile is going to be just really important, especially for consumer products. Again, I think in DeFi, you might see the same distribution as you see elsewhere. Like my guess is that, maybe Robinhood flies in the face of this, but like pro traders are mostly probably, using a number of screens and so on. But I think for any consumer application, the reality is like engagement and re-engagement really matters. And to me, probably one of the big unlocks for friend.tech is not just PWAs, but is the ability to get notifications through your PWA. I think one of the most broken parts of crypto UX historically has been that it was sort of pull only, meaning a user had to remember to engage with your product because you had no way of reaching back out to them. And so the ability, obviously, for developers to push and to send a notification to users saying, by the way, someone just bought your keys, you might be interested in chatting with this person. Or, frankly, you're about to get your vault liquidated. You might want to top up before you lose all your assets. These are all like super good interactions that are kind of the bread and butter. But imagine if you gave a traditional consumer developer like a rule, which is, okay, so you can build whatever you want, but you can't message, email, or notify your users about anything. And I think you'd see the types of usage that we're seeing in consumer crypto today, which is to say really good early engagement and then a ton of fucking churn. So I think mobile is extraordinarily important.
Yeah, instead of the Binance liquidation messages, it might be the GMX liquidation messages in the future.
Well, lots of things to look forward to.
Yeah, some more things to wake me up in the middle of the night. But exactly. I think there's a geographical unlock as well. And I apologize for the millionth time I've said this, but out in Asia, everyone seems to be mobile first, and that's anecdotal from living here for a couple of years now. And just the first time I seen like some guy with this self-made device with 20 mobile phones playing Axie Infinity, it like really clicked like on the side of a street in Chiang Mai. And I was like, oh shit, this is who we're trying to play this game against. But there is like a conception, particularly if you haven't spent a lot of time over this side of the world, that everyone has the same setup as they do in the West. They might have a laptop, maybe 2 screens, their phone goes off maybe for Twitter and WhatsApp, but a lot of people operating in the crypto and Web3 industry in Asia are definitely mobile first. And there are some quite interesting apps that came out of Asia that are mobile first. So there's also that aspect of the unlock as well. So you're not kind of catering to the same 1,000 degenerates on crypto Twitter that are based out in the West.
I mean, there's an interesting idea here that I hadn't thought of before, but you know, I've always been shocked, say, at how universal Facebook is. This like, so I'm French. A lot of, I guess, my multiculturalism comes from, I guess, Europe and the U.S. as two continents, but they're still both, you know, at least fairly similar in a few of the ways that matter in tech. And I certainly, I think, suffer from having too narrow an aperture into the impact that tech has in other parts of the world. I lived in Kenya, as it were, for part of 2018, and seeing the way, say, M-Pesa and what Safaricom has built over there. It's a mobile payment system that frankly makes crypto, that part of crypto, far less interesting in that it already exists and it's already really good. But I think, like, to date, a lot of the apps have sort of been sort of Western universalists, and obviously TikTok flies in the face of this in a big way. But it's interesting because I guess crypto comes at a time where you have a lot more interesting things happening outside the US tech-wise. And you've also got this architecture that is fundamentally self-sovereign and maybe less tied to a given state. So maybe you have some replacement for localization, and that would be the crypto religious L1 wars and maybe now L2 wars, which is, well, I'm building an Arbitrum app and an Optimism, or, you know, and actually I think L2s are much better at this, but certainly the Solana versus Ethereum versus, you know, Cosmos debates. And there's good merit to those debates, but they should be technical merits. They should not be sort of pseudo-religious backpumping. And so I guess, yeah, I wonder how that sort of cultural aspect is going to play out in crypto, because I do think it's a new era on the internet, and certainly the US remains super dominant. I think you're still seeing a lot of super interesting things coming out from here and from the West, but that's certainly a blind spot that I have that I'd love to remediate. You're making me think I should have gone to Token 2049, which I regret not going to already. So it's worth it.
It's just I think it's really interesting because you can see where, like, reading between the lines, you can see where Elon wants to take Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it these days. And in my mind, it somewhat resembles WeChat, which a lot of like Asian countries will use, but that is like the everything app. Like, you literally don't need to use anything else. Payments in there, chat, it's in there. You want your laundry picking up, washing, and bring it back, it's in there. Like, absolutely everything you want is in that app. And I think there's certainly a point in time, I don't know when that is, but there could definitely be a crypto facing super app that tries to solve all these issues that like a and centralized WeChat could.
Or just like something like X, including crypto in the back end too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think it's so interesting, and I think, you know, this lens of operating systems is at least how I think about a lot of these things. Like WeChat to me is an operating system. It happens to be an app, but it's got its own app store for all intents and purposes, and you can do so much on top of it. And, you know, I guess here dominance came through iOS and Android as the two OSs on which all of this has been built. And I think probably for both political reasons and technical reasons, well, mostly political reasons, there's probably enough room for WeChat to grow because of the relationship that I'm making all of this up, by the way. I know nothing about geopolitics, and I would listen to me with a huge grain of salt. But I suspect probably some parts of curtailing and censorship of Western tech has played in the ability for the emergence of these really, really cool products to exist. So, you know, I certainly think it's a good analogy to think of crypto as an operating system. And I would argue it's an operating system for balancing power between users and applications or developers. And so if you think about it in that way, I think the analogy you're making makes a lot of sense. And I think crypto sort of helping you break out of a given operating system through interoperability and through self-custody makes a lot of sense. I guess I'm curious, and this is part going back to the question of, will we look back at MetaMask and think, what were we all doing? And I think the answer is we won't. I think it'll make a lot of sense, and I think consumer wallets are here to stay. But going back to that question, I think we tend to overestimate sort of, if you build things purely, how would they come about? because things aren't built purely. Like, these things are not born in a vacuum. They're born in an existing tech landscape with existing habits for users. Changing user habits is near impossible. And, if we were to reinvent the internet from scratch, it would make a lot of sense for everything to be decentralized all the time. But, and this, makes me maybe an oddity in part of the crypto sphere, but I don't think we are reinventing the internet from scratch. I think parts of it will be reinvented from scratch. And I think parts of it will sort of be this new hybrid stack that has both. And the reality is there already is an internet, and unfortunately it's mostly centralized. And we have to contend with these realities. So I don't know. I think to the X might be a good example, because if you were to rebuild Twitter from scratch today, you might build it completely differently. And we're seeing a lot of really cool companies doing this. But then if you try and take X and integrate some of the superpowers that crypto gives you, you end up with a very different version of a product. And I think it's kind of cool that we're going to get to watch both of these experiments unfold in parallel.
100%. So what's next in the immediate future for you guys? Is there anything you want people to be aware of? Anyone who's building or anyone who's working alongside a project? Or
we are very focused right now on really three things. One is continuing to push, notably on mobile, but different client abstractions. And so we'll be putting out right now, Privy is a React library, and we're basically going to come out with a number of clients to make it easier to build across various frameworks, which is going to be really, really exciting. The second is continuing to improve on the self-custody tooling that we're putting out. So, for example, having a recovery site that users can go to at any time in order to recover their keys or assets. Likewise, enabling users to basically store their own recovery shards using the Shamir secret sharing system that we've built, so that in the event Privy goes offline, they still have access to their keys independent of Privy. We're continuing to try to walk that line of the spectrum between usability and convenience and independence that users need. And so we're going to put out a lot more stuff there, which I'm really, really excited about. To continue to experiment with what does it mean to build good UX in self-custody. And then the third one is account abstraction. I think there's just so much going on in that space that's really, really exciting. And I think, ultimately everybody at Privy really thinks today we are building, what is mainly being used as an EOA. But over time, this will become a signer for account abstraction wallets. And so we have an integration with Zero Dev. We're going to come out this week with an integration with Myconomy. And we're continuing to work with a number of really awesome partners doing, I think, super inspiring work around smart account stacks. So those are the three things I'm very much looking forward to in the next few months. Obviously, I think the main thing that drives us is getting to work with talented developers building really cool products. So I think doing more of that, talking to folks who are building stuff, helping see if we can solve their problems and build more delightful apps is really what we're here for.
Sweet. We'll leave all your information and stuff like that below. So if anyone's listening and you want to reach out, then, or if not, just shoot me a message and I'll put you in touch. But yeah, Henri, thanks ever so much. 563, is there anything final from you before we wrap it up?
No, it's just been really encouraging hearing the stories, and hope to hear more from you guys coming up soon.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a ton of fun.
Anytime. When you're pushing anything out in the future, just let us know. We'll run it back again. And thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're rocking. Thank you.
All right. Bye. Thanks everyone. Speak to you soon.